What's up, everybody? It's Richie here with Fan of Football 813. Week 1 just finished for college football, and I'm going to do something a little bit different this year. I did reviews last year for every game. I'm going to try to combine them. There's two different things I'm going to do. One, I'm going to break this up into 3 different parts. So I'm going to do this video is just for the games that begin at noon and that are between noon and 3:30. I have another one from 3:30 to 7:30, and then a third one for that one. So that way the video is a little shorter, and whoever you're a fan of, you can just watch that video. And I'm gonna combine. So I went back and I read all the recaps from this previous week's games, and I'm gonna combine sort of like as I preview the next game. Kind of reviewing the previous game, because whatever happened in the previous game could determine what may happen in the future games, depending with injuries and all that. So anyway, the week 2 Saturday, September 7th. The first game, it's actually an 11 a.m. Eastern time game, and it's Ohio Bobcats versus the Pittsburgh Panthers. So you have a MAC team, a really good MAC team, versus an ACC team that actually played for the ACC title last year. Ohio, they have what I call the Canadian Tim Tebow, because quarterback Nathan Workey runs and passed the last couple of years. He's had a lot of passing touchdowns and rushing touchdowns and yards and all that. And in fact, the first game they played against Rhode Island, they won it 41-20. And he passed for 188 yards and 2 touchdowns and ran for 75 and a touchdown. They had 278 total rushing yards against Rhode Island. And Pitt, they struggled against Virginia. They were up 14-13 at one point, but then they lost 30-14. Quarterback Kenny Pickett, he only had 185 passing yards, a touchdown. He threw 2 interceptions. They only had 78 rushing yards total versus Virginia. This will be kind of interesting because Ohio is one of the better teams in the MAC. And Pitt, they lost 2 1,000-yard rushers. I believe this will be even. And I'm kind of leaning towards Ohio on this, but I don't know. So check out our video picks later. All right, then you got the noon game. This is a really big one to me. Cincinnati Bearcats versus Ohio State. Cincinnati, they had 11 wins last year. They beat UCLA in their first in week 1, 24-14. Quarterback Desmond Ridder for Cincinnati passed for 242, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Running back Michael Warren had 92 rushing yards and a touchdown, and 27 receiving yards and a touchdown. They had safety Javon Hicks, who filled in for James Wiggins. James Wiggins at safety is he might be their best defensive player, one of their best players. And he's out for a season, Wiggins is. But Javon Hicks came in. He had a couple penalties, but he had a fumble recovery, and 1 interception. And then you got Ohio State. Ohio State hasn't lost to a team from Ohio in 100 years, I believe it is. Quarterback Justin Fields transferred in from Georgia. First game, yes, it's Florida Atlantic, but he had a really, really great first game. 234 passing yards, 4 passing touchdowns, 61 rushing yards, and another rushing touchdown. So he had 5 total touchdowns. That's Heisman stuff. Yes, it's Florida Atlantic, but those are the kinds of numbers a Heisman contender should put up especially against teams that they should blow out. And they did blow out Florida Atlantic. They held Florida Atlantic only at 22 rushing yards. They had 4 sacks, and defensive end Chase Young had 1.5. This will be a really, really, I think it'll be a really close game. Possible upset here. All right, then you got Army, Michigan. Another possible upset. Army has a triple option. They run for a lot of yards normally. They struggled a little bit in week 1 against Rice. They did win only 14-7. They didn't run for a lot. Quarterback Kelvin Hopkins had 53 passing yards and a touchdown, and 80 rushing yards and a touchdown. But Michigan struggled versus Middle Tennessee State. Yes, they won 40-21, but it was actually kind of back and forth for most of that first quarter, whatever. Shea Patterson, the quarterback, had 203 passing, 3 passing touchdowns. And they only had 23 rushing yards in that game. Let me check to make sure, because I was looking at that, and that doesn't sound right. Let's see. Yeah. No, they had. I wrote it wrong. They had 233 rushing yards. They held Middle Tennessee to only 67 total rushing yards. Shea Patterson himself had 28 rushing yards. So they have a new offense. They have a new offensive coordinator. I think Michigan should still beat Army, but this is a possible upset. Like I said, Army triple option, always hard to stop no matter who they play. All right, another noon game, Rutgers versus Iowa. Rutgers surprised me. Their offense actually looked good, partially because they didn't have their quarterback that sucked play. They had a transfer from Texas Tech, McLean Carter, who threw for 340 yards. He had 2 touchdowns, but he did throw 3 interceptions, so he's got to clean that up if they want to try to beat Iowa. But they did put up 48 points in the game. They had running back Isaiah Pacheco ran for 156 yards and 4 touchdowns. Their other running back, Raheem Blackshear, he only ran for 39 yards, but he had 9 receptions for 126 yards and a touchdown. And their wide receiver, Bill Milton, had 6 catches for 127 and a touchdown. So at least in that first game, it showed their offense could possibly move it this year. Last year they were terrible. And then Iowa's ranked number 20. They played Miami of Ohio. They kind of had a slow start versus them, but quarterback Nate Salient out with 252 passing, 3 touchdowns. Running back Mekhi Sargent ran for 91 yards and a touchdown and had 65 yards receiving. Iowa, their left tackle Eric Jackson, he's hurt, so he may not be in. This could be kind of a scary game depending on how Rutgers actually is this year. But Iowa might be able to come out on top, but that'll be kind of an interesting one to keep it on because it's an early season game. It's a Big Ten matchup, and only week 2, and we'll see how both teams fare out. All right, next game, Syracuse and Maryland. Syracuse took on Liberty. I picked Liberty for that upset, but it didn't happen. Although Liberty's head coach was in coaching from the press box from a stretcher because he had a herniated disc, so he was in a bed actually head coaching a game from the press box. But Syracuse did hold them to 0 points. They won 24-0, but they were kind of sluggish. Like I said, the 24 quarterback Tommy DeVito was only 17 of 35 for 176. He threw 2 interceptions. They had some rushing yards. That's how they got their touchdowns. Their D played well. They had 8 sacks. They had 2 fumble recoveries, 2 interceptions, and it held Liberty to -4 rushing yards. But Maryland against Howard, they rolled. They put up 79 points. 79-0. Quarterback transfer Josh Jackson. He came in from Virginia Tech. He passed for 245 and 4 touchdowns. Maryland had 317 rushing yards. Wide receiver Dante Demas had 3 catches, 100 yards, and 2 touchdowns. They had 8 sacks to the defense, and their punt returner, DJ Turner, had a 40-yard punt return touchdown. I don't expect Maryland to put up 79. This will be a little bit closer because it's Syracuse, but Syracuse, like I said, the reason I picked Liberty is I didn't feel like Syracuse was the top 25 team. They're ranked 22nd, and they didn't do much in that game against Liberty to show me. But I think both will be about even here. So that'll be, and it's it'll be an interesting one. All right, Old Dominion, Virginia Tech. Old Dominion, they struggled versus Norfolk State. They were down in the game. They ended up winning. They have a quarterback named Stone Smart, which interesting name. He only passed for 158 and a touchdown. They had 292 total yards, but they ran for 3 touchdowns in their win. Then Virginia Tech, they took on Boston College. They actually lost that game 35-28. Quarterback Ryan Willis, he passed for 344 and 4 touchdowns, but he threw 3 interceptions, which is part of why they lost. He only had 98 rushing yards. But I do think Virginia Tech, this one I'll say, I think Virginia Tech bounces back. They want revenge. Old Dominion upset them last year. I think Tech probably should take it. All right, then you got UAB versus Akron. UAB won 11 games last year. They won the CUSA conference. They did struggle a little bit against Alabama State. Their quarterback, Tyler Johnson, he was only 8 of 19 for 114 yards. He did have a passing touchdown. He ran for 60 yards and a touchdown. They have a really good running back in Spencer Brown. They had a kick return, Myron Mitchell. He had a 98-yard kick return for touchdown that helped them get past Alabama State. In Akron, they lost to Illinois 42-3. Quarterback Cato Nelson, he was only 10 of 24 for 122 yards and a pick. They only had 64 rushing yards. Both, kind of, UAB actually came out with a win. Akron got killed. But it should be kind of even. But I'm kind of leaning a little bit with the UAB. But, all right, then you got Kent State taking on 1AA Kennesaw State. Kent State, they played Arizona State. They lost 30-7. Quarterback Woody Barrett, he was only 9 of 16, 83 yards and a touchdown. He switched in and out with quarterback Dustin Crum. The defense did have 5 sacks with Arizona State, so I think they should bounce back here. Then you got Southern 1AA team versus Memphis. Memphis had a huge upset. They beat Ole Miss in the first game 15-10. Running back Patrick Taylor ran for 128 and a touchdown. Their defense held Ole Miss to only 173 total yards, which they had Rich Rodriguez at offensive coordinator. And they had a safety in that game. And I think they keep it going with this next one. All right, a pretty interesting non-conference game for noon. West Virginia Mountaineers and the Missouri Tigers. West Virginia, they took on James Madison, usually one of the better teams in the FCS. They kind of struggled, but they did end up winning. Quarterback transfer Austin Kendall from Oklahoma. He had 260 passing, 2 touchdowns, but they only ran for 34 yards. However, they did have 4 sacks, so they're taking on a possibly explosive Missouri team that lost to Wyoming. They lost 37-31 this week. Missouri did. They allowed 292 yards rushing. They allowed 2 100-yard rushers against Wyoming. Quarterback transfer Kelly Bryant. He was from Clemson a few years ago, and he transferred in. He did pass for 423 yards, 2 touchdowns. He threw a pick. But this will be a pretty interesting game. I feel like I know who I'm kind of leaning towards, but this will be big, kind of for both teams to see. Who. West Virginia has a new head coach, Neil Brown, came in from Troy. He did great things at Troy. But Missouri lost to a team. They went to Wyoming and lost, so they traveled across the country. And Wyoming's not a terrible Mountain West team. They went 6-6 last year. But this will be a pretty good one. All right, noon, 1AA Charleston Southern against South Carolina. South Carolina, they had a 20-9 lead on North Carolina. They lost 24-20. Quarterback Jake Bentley only threw for 142, 1 touchdown. He threw 2 interceptions late, 2 in his last 3 drives of the game, actually, that kind of sealed the loss for them. But I think they kind of should bounce back here. All right, Vanderbilt and Purdue. Vanderbilt, they had a transfer quarterback, Riley Neal from Ball State. They played Georgia. He only threw for 85 yards. They allowed 323 rushing yards to Georgia. Purdue had a really fun game against Nevada, their first game. They were up 31-14 against Nevada halfway through the third quarter, and then they lost 34-31. Nevada came all the way back. Quarterback Elijah Sindelar, they know how to move an offense, though. He did in that game. He passed for 423, 4 touchdowns, only 2 picks. Wide receiver Rondale Moore, one of the best players in the country, 11 catches, 124 and 1 touchdown. They should bounce back here, but that's sort of where I'm leaning. All right, Bowling Green and Kansas State. Bowling Green actually looked good under new coach Scott Loeffler. Yeah, they were playing Morgan State, but they have a transfer quarterback, Darius Wade from Boston College. He passed for 253, 3 touchdowns. They ran for 326 to the team. They had 620 total yards. Their defense had 4 sacks, allowed only 70 total yards. Yes, it's Morgan State, but Bowling Green kind of struggled last year, and this showed that they could possibly move it. Kansas State, they have a new head coach, Chris Kleiman. He was at North Dakota State for the last 5 years, won 4 national titles there. They have a running back transfer, James Gilbert. He transferred in from Ball State. In his first game with Kansas State, they ran for 115 and a touchdown. They had 361 rushing yards. They looked pretty good. We were able to move it. But Kansas State, it depends on Bowling Green. Is it a mirage? Was it just the competition they played? Could Bowling Green be? Because normally Bowling Green's history, they're a pretty good MAC team, and they usually play, kind of higher quote competition pretty well. So this could be a possible mini upset. So I don't think Kansas State should take them lightly. Northern Illinois, Utah, this might be a defensive game. Northern Illinois, Utah usually play really great defense, nationally ranked. Even Northern Illinois, even though they're in the MAC, they always have a really good defense. They had a slow start against Illinois State. They have a quarterback transfer, Ross Bowers from Cal. He did pass for 299, 2 touchdowns and a pick. Wide receiver Richie had 3 catches, 102, and 2 touchdowns. They only had 90 rushing yards. Their D allowed only 238 yards and 51 yards rushing. While Utah, they played BYU in their first game. They won 30-12, I think it was, or 30-14, something like that. But they kind of back and forth. Utah always plays good on defense. They have a really good running back in Zach Moss. Their quarterback Tyler Huntley, he's good, but he's a solid quarterback. But Zach Moss, he ran for 187 yards and a touchdown. And that defense, like I said, for Utah, they had 2 interception returns versus BYU, 2 interception return for touchdowns. And Utah is ranked 14th. This could be a possible kind of upset. Northern Illinois, they've won these kinds of games before against, ranked teams. So it might be one. That might be one to keep an eye. I'm kind of leaning towards Utah, but that may be one to sort of keep an eye on, just for a little bit. All right, then you got Ball State taking on 1AA Fordham. Ball State, they lost to Indiana their first game, but 34-24. They were able to move it okay. Quarterback Drew Plitt passed for 298, 2 touchdowns and an interception. They only had 100 rushing yards, but their running back Caleb Huntley ran for 81 and a touchdown. And a couple years ago, he had 1,000 yards rushing when filling in for another running back that got injured. So I think Ball State should bounce back here. All right, you got USF Bulls and Georgia Tech. This looks like an interesting game on paper. It's a usually pretty good team from the American, and Georgia Tech usually a solid team from the ACC, but man, South Florida, they took on Wisconsin. They got pummeled 49-0. Quarterback and a new high, spread offense, USF fast, whatever. They got shut out 49-0. Blake Barnett, 13 of 30, 109 yards, threw 2 interceptions. They only had 26 rushing yards as a team, 157 total yards. There were some drop passes, and then their defense allowed 234 rushing yards to Wisconsin. Jonathan Taylor, running back for Wisconsin, had 135. It was kind of expected as sort of Wisconsin's game plan. USF early on had some shots to keep it close, and they couldn't do it. But Georgia Tech, they took on Clemson. Yes, they ran for 157 yards. They got killed 52-14, but they still put up 14 points, which USF didn't. Georgia Tech did get 2 interceptions. However, they're kind of transitioning from a triple option offense to a pro-style, regular kind of offense. Their quarterbacks, they had 3 play. They combined 7 for 18, 137 yards, a touchdown, 2 interceptions. I'm from Florida. I'm in Tampa. I like USF. I hope USF can bounce back with this. I think they could. I do think this will be a pretty even game. I don't see a blowout here, and I'm not sure which way it'll really go. But if you're a USF fan, I say stick with them, at least do this, and then see what happens. A lot of people want Charlie Strong out, me included. All right, then you got your last game of the noon to 3:30 slot. Tennessee Tech, 1AA taking Miami of Ohio from the MAC. Miami of Ohio, they did lose their first game to Iowa, but they have a quarterback, Brett Gabbert, which is Blaine Gabbert's brother. He did pass for 186 yards, 2 touchdowns and a pick. 2 touchdowns and 1 pick. They only ran for 59 yards in that game, but I do think they will bounce back. All right, so that's my first video, the noon to 3:30 games. Check out my next one if you want to see those previews and breakdown. Give us a like, subscribe, and peace.